Dr. Han-Sol Park sat alone in her office at the Korean Space Research Institute. The clock on her wall showed 11:30 p.m., but she couldn't leave. Not yet. Not when the numbers on her screen made no sense at all. She rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the data again. The readings from the Black Hole Observation Project were wrong. They had to be wrong. But she had checked them 20 times already. This is impossible, she whispered to herself, taking another sip of her cold coffee. The data showed something that shouldn't exist. A clear, sharp boundary around the black hole they were studying. Black holes weren't supposed to have clear edges. They were supposed to have fuzzy boundaries called event horizons, where space and time became strange and unclear. The office door opened, and Dr. Taewon Kim walked in. He was Han-Sol's mentor, a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes. He always stayed late too, checking on the younger scientists. Han-Sol, you're still here? He asked, walking over to her desk. What's so interesting that it keeps you up this late? Han-Sol pointed at her screen. Look at these readings from the new space telescope. They show a perfect line, like a wall, right where the black hole's event horizon should be. But that's not possible, right? Taewon leaned closer to look at the screen. His friendly smile turned into a frown. Must be an error in the instruments, he said after a moment. Space telescopes can malfunction. We'll check it tomorrow with the backup systems. But Han-Sol shook her head. I already did. I checked every backup we have. They all show the same thing. And look at this. She pulled up another screen of data. These readings go back 3 months. The edge is always there, always in the same place. That's not an instrument error. Taewon sat down in the chair next to her desk. He looked worried now. What are you suggesting? I think. Han-Sol paused, knowing how crazy it would sound. I think we're seeing something new, something that changes everything we know about black holes. What if they're not just empty spaces that eat everything? What if they have actual physical boundaries? Taewon stood up quickly. Han-Sol, be careful with ideas like that. Your career is just starting. Making wild claims about black holes having solid edges, people will think you're crazy. But the data, Han-Sol started to argue, but Taewon raised his hand to stop her. Go home. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll look at this with fresh eyes and find the error. He walked to the door, then turned back. And Han-Sol, don't share this with anyone else yet. Promise me. After he left, Han-Sol looked at her screen again. She knew she should listen to her mentor. She knew she should wait and check everything again tomorrow. That would be the safe choice. Instead, she opened her email and wrote a message to Jae-ho Lee in the quantum computing lab. If she was right about this, she would need his help to prove it. She attached her data files and wrote, Jae-ho, I found something impossible. Can you run these numbers through your quantum simulator? And please don't tell anyone else yet. I need to be sure before this gets out. She hit send, then started gathering more data. The night was going to be long, but Han-Sol didn't care. She had a feeling she was looking at something that would change science forever. As she worked, she didn't notice the small blip on one of her monitoring screens. Just for a second, the edge of the black hole had pulsed, like it was sending a signal. By the time she looked at that screen again, everything appeared normal. But nothing about this black hole was normal. And soon, Han-Sol Park would discover just how strange things were about to become. She saved her files and started a new set of calculations. Outside her window, the stars shined brightly in the night sky. Somewhere out there, at the edge of a black hole, something was waiting to be discovered. And Han-Sol was going to be the one to find it, no matter what anyone else said. Jae-ho Lee read Han-Sol's email for the 3rd time. The quantum computing lab was quiet at 6 a.m., but his mind was racing with possibilities. The data she had sent him was unlike anything he had seen before. He had spent all night running simulations, His quantum computers, usually used for complex mathematical problems, were now processing Hansel's black hole data. Each result showed the same thing: a clear, defined edge where there should be only chaos. The door opened, and Hansel walked in. She looked tired but excited. "Did you see it too?" she asked, putting down 2 cups of coffee on his desk. "Yes," Jaiho said, pointing to his main screen. "I ran the numbers through every simulation we have. The edge is real. But that's not even the strangest part. Look at this." He pulled up a new display. It showed a pattern in the energy readings from the black hole's edge. "There's a rhythm to it," he explained. "Like a heartbeat, but perfectly timed. Nature doesn't make patterns this precise." Hansel sat down, her eyes wide. "Someone made this," she whispered. "Or something made it. The edge isn't natural. It's constructed." "Exactly," Jaiho agreed. "But the technology needed to build something around a black hole, it would be far beyond anything humans can do." They spent the next few hours developing their theory. Hansel worked on the physics equations, while Jaiho ran more simulations. They filled 3 whiteboards with calculations and diagrams. "If we're right," Hansel said, drawing another diagram, "then black holes aren't just holes in space. They're more like containers. Something or someone found a way to put walls around them." Jaiho nodded, typing quickly on his keyboard. "The quantum calculations support that. The edge acts like a membrane, a skin around the black hole that keeps it stable. But why? Why would anyone want to contain a black hole?" Before Hansel could answer, Dr. Taiwan walked into the lab. He looked at the whiteboards, then at the computer screens, his face growing more concerned. "I thought I told you to wait," he said to Hansel. "This is dangerous territory. You're suggesting that someone is building structures around black holes. Do you know how that sounds?" "We have proof," Hansel said firmly. She showed him Jaiho's simulations and their calculations. "The patterns are too perfect to be natural. Someone made this edge, and we need to find out why." Taiwan was quiet for a long time, studying their work. Finally, he sighed. "If you're wrong about this, it could end your careers. But if you're right," he paused, "if you're right, this changes everything we know about physics and maybe even about humanity's place in the universe." "We need to publish our findings," Hansel said. "The scientific community needs to know about this." "They'll attack you," Taiwan warned. "They'll say you're seeing patterns that aren't there. Are you ready for that?" Hansel looked at Jaiho, who nodded. "We're sure about this," she said. "Something is happening at the edges of black holes, and we need to understand what it is." Just then, all the screens in the lab flickered. For a moment, strange symbols appeared across them, shapes that looked almost like letters, but in no language any of them knew. Then the screens returned to normal. "What was that?" Taiwan asked, his voice shaking slightly. "I don't know," Jaiho said, checking his computers. "But it happened right when we were discussing publishing our findings. Almost like something was responding to us." Hansel felt a chill run down her spine. Their discovery was already extraordinary, but now it seemed that whatever they had found might be aware of them too. The edge of the black hole wasn't just a wall. It was a doorway, and something on the other side was paying attention. The large meeting room at the International Space Science Conference was packed. Scientists from around the world had come to hear Dr. Hansel Park present her theory about black hole edges. In the front row, Dr. Sun Ma Choi sat with her arms crossed, her expression already showing disbelief. Hansel stood at the podium, trying to keep her hand steady as she showed the first slide. "Our data shows clear evidence of constructed boundaries around black holes," she explained, pointing to her graphs. "These edges appear to be artificial structures, not natural phenomena." A murmur ran through the crowd. Sun Mai raised her hand immediately. "Dr. Park," she said, her voice sharp, "are you suggesting that someone is building walls around black holes?" "That's impossible. The gravitational forces would tear any structure apart. The data suggests otherwise. Han Sol replied calmly, though her heart was racing. Dr. Jai-Ho Lee's quantum simulations confirm our findings. She nodded to Jai-Ho, who sat nervously in the second row. Sun Ma stood up. I've reviewed your data. Your instruments must be malfunctioning. Black holes are simple. They consume everything that crosses their event horizon. There are no edges, no walls, and certainly no artificial structures. More scientists began raising their hands, their faces showing mixtures of doubt and concern. Han Sol felt her confidence wavering, but then she remembered the strange symbols that had appeared on their screens. She knew they were onto something important. If you'll look at the next slide, Han Sol continued, you'll see the pattern we discovered in the energy readings. But when she clicked to the next slide, something unexpected happened. The conference room's main screen began showing new data, readings that were coming in live from their observatory back in Korea. The black hole's edge was active, pulsing with energy in a way they had never seen before. What is this? Sun Ma demanded, standing up again. Is this some kind of trick? It's not a trick, Jai-Ho said, checking his tablet. These are live readings. The edge is becoming more visible. Look at the energy patterns. The room erupted in conversation as scientists pulled out their phones and tablets, checking their own observatory data. Han Sol could hear fragments of excited discussions. She might be right. This is impossible. Look at these readings. Dr. Tadwan, who had been sitting quietly in the back, walked to the front of the room. Everyone, please, he called out. What we're seeing right now is unprecedented. Instead of dismissing Dr. Park's findings, we need to study them carefully. Sun Ma shook her head. This challenges everything we know about physics. It's more likely that you've all made a serious error than that someone is building structures around black holes. Just then, every electronic device in the room, phones, tablets, laptops, displayed the same strange symbols they had seen in the lab. They stayed on the screens for exactly 3 seconds before disappearing. The room fell silent. Han Sol looked at Sun Ma, whose face had gone pale. Still think it's just an error? Han Sol asked quietly. This doesn't prove anything, Sun Ma said, but her voice was less certain now. We need more data, more verification. Then help us study it, Han Sol suggested. Whatever we're dealing with, it's bigger than personal rivalries. Something is trying to communicate with us through these black hole edges. We need to understand what and why. As the scientists in the room began talking excitedly among themselves, Han Sol noticed something on her own tablet. Among the strange symbols that had appeared, one set looked different. When she looked closer, she realized why. They were numbers, coordinates. Something at the edge of the black hole wasn't just sending them messages. It was inviting them to come closer. Jai-Ho's fingers flew across his keyboard as he worked to decode the strange signals. It had been 3 days since the conference, and the coordinates they received weren't the only message hidden in the black hole's pulses. There was more, much more. Look at this pattern, he said to Han Sol, who was drinking her 5th coffee of the day. These signals repeat every 3.14 seconds exactly. Pi, Han Sol said, suddenly alert. They're using mathematical constants to communicate. Even Sun Ma, who had decided to stay and help despite her doubts, looked impressed. Not just P, she added, pointing to another screen. These energy pulses match the exact frequency of Planck's constant. Whoever made this wants us to know they understand physics. The 3 scientists worked through the night, translating more of the signals. Each new pattern revealed itself as another mathematical constant or physical law. It was like finding pieces of a puzzle they didn't know existed. Wait, Jai-Ho said suddenly, his voice shaking. I think I found something new. He typed rapidly, running the latest signals through his quantum computer. These aren't just constants anymore. They're instructions. The main screen filled with new data. Numbers turned into diagrams. Diagrams became blueprints. The black hole's edge was teaching them how to build something. "This is impossible," Sun Mai whispered, but her voice held wonder instead of doubt now. "These are designs for a quantum communication device, but it's far more advanced than anything we've ever made." Hansol studied the blueprints carefully. "They want us to build this so we can talk to them properly," she said. "Everything until now has been them proving they're intelligent. This is them asking for a real conversation." The door opened, and Dr. Tadawon walked in with several officials from the Korean Space Agency. Their faces were serious. "We've been monitoring your progress," one official said. "The government wants to know if these signals pose any threat." "No," Hansol said firmly. "They're teaching us, showing us new technology. If they wanted to harm us, why help us understand their science?" Taiwan stepped forward. "The space agency has decided to support your research fully," he announced. "Whatever we need to build this communication device, you'll have it." Just then, all the screens in the lab lit up with new signals, but this time, the message was clear. In simple mathematical equations, it showed them something that made everyone in the room gasp. "These aren't just random coordinates," Jai-ho said, his voice filled with awe. "They're showing us the locations of every black hole they've modified. There's a whole network of them out there." Sun Mai, who had been skeptical from the start, now stood looking at the data with amazement. "They've built a communication network using black holes," she said. "But why? What do they want to tell us that's so important?" The answer came in the next set of signals. As Jai-ho decoded them, his hands began to tremble. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "The message, it's in English. They've been learning our language this whole time." Everyone crowded around his screen to read the simple words that appeared. "Greetings, ancestors. We are your children's children, reaching back through time. The black holes are not what you think. They are the keys to humanity's greatest achievement. But first, you must help us build the door." Captain Dahyun Kang stood before the gleaming probe in the launch bay. The spacecraft was the most advanced machine ever built by the Korean Space Agency, designed to travel closer to a black hole than any human device before. "The probe is ready," he said to Hansol and Jae-ho, who were checking the newly installed quantum communication device. "But are we sure about these coordinates? One small error, and we'll lose everything." Hansol nodded confidently. The numbers came directly from them. "Our future selves wouldn't send us to the wrong place." The launch room was buzzing with activity. Scientists and engineers ran final checks while government officials watched from behind glass windows. Even Dr. Sun Mai, now fully convinced of the discovery's importance, was helping calibrate the instruments. "The quantum device is online," Jai-ho reported, his eyes fixed on his screens. "It's already picking up signals from the black hole's edge. They're waiting for us." Dahyun would pilot the probe remotely from Earth, guiding it through the dangerous journey to the black hole. The mission would take 3 months, following a path that their future descendants had mapped out for them. "Remember," Hansol said to Dahyun, "when you get close to the edge, you'll see things that break the laws of physics. Don't panic. Everything they've told us so far has been true." The countdown began. The probe's engines hummed to life. On screens around the room, they could see other black holes in the network becoming more active, their edges glowing with strange energy. 10 seconds to launch, called the mission controller. Dahyun sat at his control station, hands steady on the controls. He had trained for this mission for weeks, but nothing could really prepare him for what they might find. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The probe shot into space, riding a column of fire. Everyone watched the main screen as it climbed higher and higher, then disappeared into the darkness above. "First stage separation successful," Dahyun reported. "Beginning orbital insertion." Suddenly, all their instruments showed a surge of activity. The black hole network was responding to the launch. Pulses of energy moved from one black hole to another, like signals being passed through a vast web. "They're helping guide the probe," Sun Mai said in amazement. Look at these gravitational patterns. They're creating a path of stable space-time for us to follow. Hours passed as the probe moved further into space. Then, just as everyone was settling into the long wait ahead, Jeho's quantum device lit up with a new message. "Warning," he read aloud. "Others have noticed your launch. You are not alone in watching the edges. Hurry." Han Sol felt her heart race. What others? Are there more advanced civilizations out there? "The probe is functioning perfectly," Da Hyun reported, trying to stay focused. "But I'm detecting unusual energy signatures nearby. Something else is moving out there." Their future descendants had opened a door through time and space. But now it seemed they weren't the only ones interested in what lay beyond that door. The race to reach the black hole's edge had begun, and humanity couldn't afford to lose. "Full power to the engines," Han Sol ordered. "Whatever's out there, we need to reach the edge first. Humanity's future depends on it." 3 months had passed. Captain Da Hyun's probe was finally approaching the black hole's edge. Back on Earth, the control room was silent as everyone watched the main screen. "Distance to edge: 1,000,000 kilometers, Da Hyun announced. The probe's camera showed something impossible, a thin, shimmering line that marked the boundary of the black hole. "Energy readings are off the charts," Jeho said from his station. "The membrane is active. It knows we're here." The unknown vessels that had followed them kept their distance, watching. No one knew who they were or what they wanted, but they hadn't tried to interfere, yet. 500,000 kilometers, Da Hyun reported. The edge was clearer now. It wasn't black at all, but a shifting wall of light and patterns. Han Sol leaned forward, studying the images. Those markings on the membrane, they looked like writing. Matching them against known languages, Sun Mai said, typing quickly. Her eyes widened. "This is impossible. The symbols, they're in Korean, and English, and every other human language. Not just current languages," Jeho added, checking his quantum readings. "Some of these are older than recorded history. Others," he paused, "others don't exist yet." The probe moved closer. Now they could see that the entire edge was covered in writing, mathematics, and diagrams, a vast library wrapped around the black hole. 100,000 kilometers, Da Hyun said. His hands were steady on the controls, but his voice shook slightly. "Wait, something's happening." A section of the membrane began to glow brighter. Patterns shifted, forming words in clear Korean. "Welcome home, ancestors. You have found us at last." New data flooded their computers. The membrane wasn't just a wall. It was a vast machine, more advanced than anything humans had ever built, and on its surface was a message that made everyone in the room gasp. "Property of the Human Archives Project, established 2874 CE. "That's impossible," Sun Mai whispered. "That's 800 years in the future." "Look at the construction marks," Han Sol said, pointing to specific details on the membrane. "These are human engineering methods, just far more advanced. We built this. Our descendants built this." More words appeared on the membrane. "This archive contains the complete history of human civilization, preserved where time cannot destroy it. You are our past. We are your future. And now, at last, we can share what we have learned." The unknown ships watching them suddenly moved closer, but before anyone could worry, new words appeared. "Do not fear the observers. They are also human, from other timelines, other possibilities. They have found their own archives. The black holes connect all possible human futures." Da Hyun's probe had reached its final position. The membrane filled their entire view now, a masterpiece of engineering that spanned both space and time. "Ready to receive full transmission," Jeho reported. The quantum device they'd built using future instructions hummed to life. "They're about to tell us everything." Han Sol looked at the screen with tears in her eyes. They had found more than just an edge around a black hole. They had found humanity's greatest achievement, a way to preserve all knowledge forever, safe from the end of time itself. The transmission from the black hole's edge began flowing through Jai-Ho's quantum device. Images, words, and data appeared on every screen in the control room. The truth about humanity's greatest project was finally being revealed. Each black hole in our network, the message explained, is a storage system. What you think destroys information actually preserves it forever. We built the edges to access this storage. Han Sol watched as the screen showed the history of the project. In the future, humanity had discovered that black holes didn't actually destroy the things they absorbed. Instead, they kept everything as perfect information, frozen in time. But why? Sun Mai asked, speaking to the membrane as if it could hear her. Why build this network? The answer appeared immediately. Because the universe is dying. In our time, the stars are going dark. We needed a way to save everything we had learned, everything we had become. More images showed their future. A cosmos growing cold and dark as the last stars burned out, but inside each black hole, protected by the membranes, human knowledge remained safe and perfect. The edges are not walls, the message continued. They are doors. Through them, we can reach across time to save our past selves from making the same mistakes we did. We can guide humanity to a better future. Dai Hian's probe sent new readings. The membrane was changing, parts of it becoming transparent. Through these windows, they could see inside the black hole itself. But instead of destruction, they saw data. Endless streams of perfect information. Your time is a crossroads, the future humans explained. Many possible paths lie ahead. In some futures, humanity destroys itself. In others, we survive but lose our way. We built this network to guide all versions of humanity toward survival. The other ships watching them sent their own signals now. Each came from a different future, a different path humanity had taken. Some had found their archives earlier, others later. All had been forever changed by what they learned. This is why the edges exist, Han Sol said softly. They're not just storage devices. They're teaching machines. Our future selves are trying to help us grow up as a species. More than that, Jai-Ho added, reading the new data, they're trying to connect all possible human civilizations. Every choice, every path we might take, they want us all to survive. The membrane's message continued. What you see as a black hole's edge is the most complex computer ever built. But it's also the simplest thing in the universe. It's hope. Hope preserved in the darkest places, waiting to light the way forward. The truth was bigger than anyone had imagined. Humanity hadn't just built walls around black holes. They had turned the most destructive forces in the universe into libraries, bridges, and teachers. The edges weren't barriers. They were gateways to humanity's true potential. 1 year had passed since the first contact at the black hole's edge. The Korean Space Research Institute had grown into the center of humanity's greatest project. Scientists from every country now worked together in the vast new buildings that surrounded Han Sol's old office. The 7th communication hub is online, Jai-Ho reported, standing at his new control station. The room around him buzzed with activity as teams monitored signals from different black holes across the galaxy. Han Sol nodded, looking at the main screen that showed their growing network. Humanity had already built several small versions of the quantum devices their descendants had taught them to make. Each one could talk to the black hole archives, learning from countless possible futures. Another timeline has made contact, Sun Mai announced from her station. She had become the lead researcher for parallel universe communications. This version of Earth found their archive 3 days ago. They want to share their knowledge too. The room's largest screen showed a map of all known black holes with edges. Hundreds of lights blinked across the galaxy, each one a library of human knowledge from different times and different possibilities. Dai Hian walked in, back from his latest probe mission. The new membrane sensors are working perfectly, he said. We can now read the stored data much more clearly. The future humans say we're learning faster than they expected. That's because we have help from every possible version of ourselves, Han Sol said. She touched the screen, bringing up the latest data. Look at this. We've already learned how to stop 3 major disasters that would have happened in the next 10 years. The black hole archives had changed everything. Wars had stopped as people realized they were fighting their own possible futures. Climate change was being reversed using knowledge from timelines that had solved it. Diseases were cured using medical research from 1,000 different Earths. New transmission coming in, Jai-Ho called out. Everyone turned to watch as the message appeared. You have done well, ancestors. Your timeline is now firmly on the path to survival. But there is more work ahead. The network is still growing. There are more edges to build, more paths to connect, more futures to save. Dr. Tadwan, now the project's senior advisor, smiled from his chair in the corner. When you first showed me that data about black hole edges, he said to Hansol, I thought it would end your career. Instead, it started humanity's greatest journey. We're not just studying the universe anymore, Hansol replied. We're helping to preserve it. Every black hole we find becomes another library, another chance to save another version of humanity. The screen filled with new data as another timeline made contact. This was everyday life now, an endless flow of knowledge from every possible future, all working together to ensure humanity's survival. Ready to send today's data package, Sunmai announced. They had learned that helping other timelines was as important as receiving help. Each version of humanity had unique knowledge to share. As Hansol looked around the room at her friends and colleagues, she remembered that night 1 year ago, when she'd first seen the impossible edge in her data. That edge had led them to the greatest discovery in human history. That humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its knowledge, but its ability to reach across time and space to help itself. The black holes weren't endings anymore. They were beginnings, doorways to a future where every possible version of humanity would survive and thrive together.